Alright, we're going to do some PPP configuration here, and we're going to set up PAP and CHAP authentication as well. So we have our topology that we've been using for a while now, and I have to make some changes here because we have these Ethernet connections that we don't really want to use anymore because we're going to start using serial. So I'm going to get rid of these, and I'm going to switch us over to some serial connections. So in order to do so, I have to save my config, which I already did, and in packet tracer you have to turn things off, and then I have to throw some wicks in here. So that's exactly what we're going to do. Just give me a moment as we toss some wicks in here. The wicks give you that serial connection interface. And you can, there are ones with 2 ports and stuff, but I'm just going to put 4 singles in there because why not? Alright, and now we're going to connect it with serial. So here at the connection selection, we can choose DCE or DTE side. So I'm going to make router 0 be the DCE for each. And we're just going to hook these up. There we go. And I don't know why that's not showing green, but it's fine. Alright, so we have to give these IP addresses. So we're going to go into config mode. And let's check how things are set up first. So let's give it 172 addresses. So we'll go into 000 and we'll say we're going to give it that /30 mask again, because especially with serial here, it's point-to-point link. There's only going to be 2 devices on it. Alright, looking good. I'm just going to go through these real quick. And again, I recommend that you do the same thing in your labs as I'm doing here right now. Do it on more than 1 or 2 devices. Make a little topology essentially, and do so each video. Each time you have to do a lab, start from scratch. I mean, literally start at the blank slate and start adding them and configuring them. You'll get yourself used to all the commands you have to learn. We're almost done here. Alright, looking good on the serials. So let's go into one of our interfaces. We'll do so from router 0 to router 1. So that was serial 030, I believe. Yep, 030. And in order to switch to PPP, we have to change the encapsulation on that interface. By default, HDLC is used. So what we will have to do is say encapsulation PPP. And now it's going to go down because the other side doesn't match. So we have to do the same thing over here. Go into my serial interface. We're going to say encapsulation PPP. And everything comes back up. So now we're using PPP. Simple as that. So that's really how you change encapsulation for PPP. There are other options you can do as well, depending on, again, your iOS version, your router, whether or not you're doing it in Packet Tracer or with an actual device. You'll have different commands available to you, because what you have here is a subset of what's simulated in this right now. So there are some things that you can do with PPP that I can't show you at this second, but are available. So for example, you can compress the traffic with compress and then say predictor. So you can reduce the amount of data that's transmitted, kind of like tar or GZ or zip encryption or zip compression, I mean, things like that. Same idea. And you can set the quality of a link. So you could say PPP quality 80, for example. Remember I was talking about how PPP has that link quality check? So this uses that. And what it's saying is if the quality goes under 80%, the link will shut down. So you can kind of have a quality of service minimum that you want for your link quality. There's also such a thing as multi-link. So kind of like Ether channel for Ethernet. If you have multiple serial connections going from one or just multiple connections going from one router to another, you can create a multi-link interface and then add them to that multi-link interface. So really how you would do that is you would go in and make a new multi-link interface by saying interface multi-link and then number it. I can't do that here, but you can on many other devices. And it'll make a multi-link interface. And then you give that multi-link interface an IP address. Something like that. Whatever it might be. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't use that because it's the same as the others, but here you go. You can give it an IP address for the multi-link connection that you created. And then you would basically just tell it, yes, this is a multi-link with PPP multi-link. And then you have to make it part of the group. So you'd say this is group 1. And then you would go into whatever interfaces were involved, such as interface serial 030 or something like that. And then you would say PPP multi-link, press enter, and then PPP multi-link group 1 to make it part of group 1. And then you could do that with the second interface and the third interface and so on. And then that'll bundle them together kind of to send traffic in one direction. So that is available to you if you happen to have multiple serial interfaces or something like that to from one location to another. Probably somewhat rare, but that is there for you. Alright, so we're going to do some authentication. So I mentioned there's two types of authentication. PPP has PAP and CHAP. So PAP is a very basic authentication scheme. It uses just a username and password that's sent in plain text, so there's no encryption or authentication really, besides just here's my username. CHAP uses a three-way handshake with a shared secret and encrypts everything. So it's more secure in its handshake methodology. It's more secure because it encrypts things. It's a better option. So I'm going to configure both of those so you can see them. So we'll start out with PAP. and I'm on, what am I on? Yeah, serial interface 030, so we're going to do that to router 1 over here. And in order to configure PAP, you have to create a username and password on each router. And the way I'm going to do it is you can actually create the user on each router and then send it to the other side. So the username and password configured on a router must be the expected username sent from the other one. And it'll make more sense when you see it. But I'm going to make a local user on router 0 for router 1. And then in my configuration I'm going to send my router 0 username and password to router 1 with a different command. And then the reverse on the other side. So it's kind of funky, but that's how it goes. So we're going to make router 1's username. So what we'll do is username R1, because why not? And I'm going to give them a password of Cisco. Now I'm going to go into my interface that connects to router 1. And we already did encapsulation PPP, so that's done, but I would do encap PPP. And then I'm going to say I need to do authentication, so I'll PPP Authentication and PAP. And then the final command I have to give on router 0 is I'm going to say PPP PAP sent username, and then I'm going to send router 0 and a password that it's going to expect. So now I'm sending my router 0 username over to router 1 with this command, and the username I created previously is router 1 that's going to be sent to me. Again, kind of goofy, but that's the way you do. So we're going to do username R0, password Cisco over on router 1, and we're going to go into interface 030. We're going to say encapsulation PPP, and same as before, PPP Authentication PAP, and PPP PAP sent username, and I'm going to send R1 and password of Cisco. There we go, and it came up. Everything should be okay. And we're up. Okay, let me see if I... There we go. So I just pinged from router 1 to router 0. So that all works well. So that's all it is for PAP. You make a username on one router that is the username they're going to expect from the other side, and then you just send whatever username you want across that link for your router. So if you're dealing with a service provider, you know, they're going to have something specific they want you to create on your router to make that work. Most likely they're not going to use PAP though. What they most likely might use is CHAP. So let's do that to a different router. We'll do router 2 and router 0. So what I'll do here is we'll do CHAP on router 0 to router 2. And it'll show you that you can mix and match. You don't have to choose one. So we're going to go into, what link was that? Was that 010? Yep. Alright. Config mode. And we have to make a username for router 2. So the way CHAP works, it's going to seem a little bit similar, but it's a little bit different. So CHAP with the configuration is actually a little bit simpler. It has one less command, but you have to create a username for the other router on your local router, just like with PAP, but it has to be the host name of the other router. So with CHAP, I can't send a username over the link with the sent username type command we did before. It's going to automatically try to use the host name. So I have to make a username on router 0 to match router 2's host name, and both actually are running with the same host name of router, so we need to change that first. So I'm going to make R0, actually named R0, and R2 is going to be R2. So that's my preliminary step there to make sure my host name is actually set up correctly. And now we're going to make a username for R2 on R0. I'm on R0 now. I'm going to say hostname R2, password Cisco. I know I'm not very imaginative with my passwords. We're going to go into the serial interface that connects to it. So that's 010. We're going to tell it we're going to use PPP. And it's going to go down because it doesn't match then. That's fine. And we're going to tell it we're going to use chat. And now on router R2, I'm going to do the same thing. So we're going to make a username, R0, password Cisco, and we're going to go into 030, which is my serial interface there. And we're going to say encapsulations PPP. And I'm going to use chat. And we are up now, so that's looking good. Let me see if I can do this right here. Here we go. So I just pinged from router 2 to router 0 using chat. That's all there is to that as well. So we just make a username, we tell it to use chat on the interface, and then that's pretty much it. You just got to make sure your username is the other side's host name, and make sure you actually set your host names. If you're using a service provider, then there's a pretty much guaranteed chance that they're going to have some long username associated to the router based on its physical location and what subnets it handles and things like that. So there are some show commands we can do with PPP. Since we're here, we'll show a couple of those. We can do debug, of course, PPP. And actually have to define some things you want to do. You could check out authentication information, negotiation, packet stuff. And again, if you are connected through console, it'll all come up in your console when you turn that on. You can do show interfaces, serial, and then the serial interface in question. So here's the information on this. It'll tell you your encapsulation, tell you some details about it, give you some statistical data, of course, give you your IP address. Remember the bandwidth. Make sure you set your bandwidth values on the interfaces, which I did not in my example here. Make sure you do that. And then we can also do show controllers, which will give you a ton of detailed information about your different interface controllers on your device, including the serial one. There it is. It'll tell you, is it DCE or DTE, you know, what hardware it is, what's the end of the clock, and things like that. So those are some of our show commands we can do. And from here we're going to go on to frame relay.